I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Recently, we discussed boss introductions that both blew me away, as well as that left me thinking, meh. But what about those mid-battle cutscenes that denote a phase transition of epic proportions? Today, we'll be ranking my top 10 mid-battle cutscenes in Soulsborne. Why a top 10? Well, the early Souls games kinda lack these cutscenes, with Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2 having none to speak of, so my regular format of ranking my favorite boss transition cutscene per game just wouldn't work. I have 3 criteria I'm looking at for these cutscenes. One is the cinematography, for example, the usage of camera angles, the boss themselves, or the arena. 2 is music. While I'm no musician and my ability to critique music is high school level at best, I find that mid-battle cutscenes often lean into their music as a way to shift into the Phase 2 theme for the boss. And 3, fun factor. Quite frankly, when I watch a cutscene, am I excited, terrified, intimidated, or a mix of all 3? It's a shame I'm looking specifically at cutscenes though, as the Burnt Ivory King from Dark Souls 2 emerging from a giant Sauron portal, Soul of Cinders, emotional transformation into Gwyn complete with Plin Plin Plon in the background, and Starscourge Radahn's Meteor Smash must all be omitted. If you want a list of enraged states, let me know down below. So with all that being said, be sure to parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future videos. We've got a very dumb Valentine's video coming out on Friday, where I look at toxic Soulsborne relationships. It's gonna be great. And let's begin. The best mid-battle boss cutscenes in Soulsborne, ranked. Let me know your favorites down below. At number 10, we have Hoarah from Elden Ring. This is the mid-fight cutscene of the endgame Godfrey First Elden Lord boss fight, and it made an impression, not just on the players, but on poor Sarosh as well. You fought with Godfrey battling his giant axe, his intense arena-wide slams, and his composed fighting style. But eventually, he succumbs, realizing that we, the Tarnished, are stronger than he thought possible. After all, he shows up at the end of the game with no real knowledge of what we've been up to in the lands between, only knowing that we killed his son Morgott. On top of this, we have Sarosh, the Beast Regent of Godfrey, who played a crucial role in the pre-shattering course of Elden Ring, an advisor, a celebrated symbol, so much so that Radahn took to wearing the armor of the Golden Lion. He was Godfrey's companion even after being banished to the Badlands, and you expect Sarosh to do something in this fight, to become corporeal and back Godfrey up. That's not what happens. Sarosh is thanked for his service, and promptly has his jaw dislocated, the blood of the Beast Regent coating Godfrey as he gives in to his base instincts, to who he was before he became the Elden Lord. Hoarah, warrior. Sarosh suppressed the bloodlust in Godfrey's heart, but by doing this, he suppressed Godfrey's ability to fight, as sometimes you do have to abandon strategy and tact in order to one-up a tough opponent. It goes hand in hand with Hoarah's brand new WWE moveset and completely shifts the tone of the battle, a tone bathed in blood. For being so unexpected and so delightfully gory, Hoarah lands at number 10. At number 9, we have Genichiro Ashina from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Atop Ashina Castle, Wolf and Genichiro face each other in proper combat for the first time. As the player, we've been prepared for this moment, leveling up our shinobi skills, collecting new abilities, and cutting our way through the outskirts, the Hirata estate, and the castle to save our lord. What we expected was for the fight to end once Genichiro's 2 health bars were depleted. That's how it went for every encounter prior to this. So when we instead shift to a cutscene, the realization that Genichiro Ashina is about to whip out a new form is a startling revelation. Genichiro first asks Wolf to abandon his former master, attempting to court the shinobi with the promise of protecting Ashina. Yet for Wolf, all that matters is Kuro, and Kuro does not want this. So Genichiro, dismissing Wolf's claims of heresy, reveals the depths of his desires to see Ashina survive. He is willing to accept that heresy to bring this kingdom back from the depths, and as his armor begins to crumble away, he takes a step forwards, lightning piercing the clouds in the background as the tone of the arena turns completely cold, the warmth of the sun blotted out by this raging torrent. I love the moment where the lightning strikes Genichiro's sword, and the man has no hesitation, no surprise on his face. He is stone cold, as if he can control the very lightning himself. It's intimidating as hell. And with the reveal of Genichiro, Way of Tomoe, you realize there's so much more to this man than meets the eye. While he shows up again at the end of the game with a second mortal blade, it's a played out formula at that point. We already expect this from him, but only because we were surprised by this initial phase transition all the way back at Ashina Castle. And then the fight starts, he immediately lunges at you, and if you don't know you can Makiri counter this, you die. That's kind of funny. At number 8, we have Ornstein and Smo from Dark Souls. Aside from the Bed of Chaos, Ornstein and Smo are the only other bosses in this game to have dedicated cutscenes after the boss fight begins. Why I'm listing both of them here, however, is because you can't really have one without the other. Depending on who you kill first, Ornstein or Smo, the surviving knight will have a cutscene where they absorb the power of their fallen comrade. What I like is that Ornstein and Smo are two incredibly different people. One of them is an upstanding knight who has slain dragons, who has a reverence for the royalty of Anor Londo, and who clearly cares about loyalty. While the other is an executioner, a cannibal from the depths whose depravity is only matched by his intense size and his jealousy of the four knights of Gwyn, which knows no bounds. When you kill Smo first, Ornstein doesn't let the mask crack. Obviously they don't get along, you can infer that from their personalities, but a comrade you fight alongside is still a comrade. He gently places a hand on Smo's armor, absorbs the electricity within, and grows to massive size, preparing to hand the chosen undead their ass. But when you kill Ornstein first, there's a moment. Ornstein's finger twitches, he's still alive, as the hammer of Smo comes down and crushes him. That care that Ornstein showed is completely absent with Smo, the executioner taking the power of this Knight of Gwyn. And while absent in the Dark Souls remastered version of the game, if you play the original copy of Dark Souls, you can actually hear Smo laughing as he crushes Ornstein, that jealousy turning to contentment as he realizes he's stronger than him. Stronger than the people who shut him out for his cannibalistic tendencies. I love a subtle bit of storytelling, and I felt it would be wrong to not include ONS on this list. At number 7, we have Godric the Grafted from Elden Ring. I was debating here between Godric and Rykard for this spot, as they both fill a similar niche to me, but while I do adore the campiness of Rykard and the horrific imagery of the blasphemous blade pull, I can't help but swing back to Godric. When you face the Lord of all that is golden, he starts off fully buying into his own hype. Godric is convinced he can destroy you, his grafting turning him into this monstrosity, wielding a large axe and commanding the storms themselves to fight for his cause. And yet it doesn't take long for the Tarnished and the player to realize that Godric isn't all that. He's tough for a first-time fight, yet for all of his bluster, all of his bloat, he doesn't really manage to back up his threat level. So when you reach the halfway point of the fight, you quickly realize that Godric is not this composed ruler, but a desperate fool, emphasized by his impulsive decision to cut his hand off. What I've always loved is how prior to the cutscene you'll actually see his character model getting ready to cut the hand off before it switches over, which is a really cute detail. With an agonizing scream, he slices off his arm and turns to the dragon corpse that he'd been coveting when we first entered. Of course, he does as one does when they're obsessed with the idea of grafting, slamming that stump into the neck of the dragon corpse, grafting it to himself to create one of the most badass flamethrowers we've ever seen, before it seamlessly cuts back to gameplay where he's in the exact same pose he ended the cutscene in as that aggressive second phase music starts to play. That act alone is already worthy of a top 10 placement in this video, but what brings this cutscene over the edge and really sells Godric is the absolutely phenomenal work by the voice actor Ramon Tikaram. I actually grew up seeing him on British TV, and he's a fantastic actor. That scream he gives as the cutscene starts is harrowing. And the way he delivers that final line, it gives me chills every single time. While I personally prefer less bombastic and more calculated, controlled characters when they transition to a new phase, I can't deny that a little part of me absolutely loves watching Godric go completely apeshit crazy. I can definitely see a world where this is a top 5 or top 3 cutscene for most people, I just have a slightly different preference. At number 6, we have Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, from Elden Ring. I told you that my preferences are a little more subtle, and I love a boss that remains composed, or can at least provide the illusion. And this truly is an illusion of a cutscene given Ranni's up to no good. Defeating Rennala's first phase causes the headmistress to fall to the ground, and you're treated to a sad look at this poor woman. She crawls desperately towards the amber egg that she clutched, her final gift from her bitch-ass ex-husband Radagon, and all I feel is pity. While I'm not familiar with the lore of the Amber Egg myself, I can at least conclude that it's a form of escapism for Rennala as she falls deeper and deeper into her own grief, having lost all of her children. Ranni is dead, Radahn is corrupted, and Rykard was vored, while every child she attempts to conceive of her magic ends up frail and faulty. But then things get fun. For Rennala wasn't left defenseless, though not through her own power, nay, Ranni the Witch left an enchantment on her mother's amber egg, knowing full well that she'd be a target for the Tarnished and other demigods alike who wished to recreate the Elden Ring and bring those runes back together. A dark mist fills the room as Ranni's words echo in the chamber. Send word far and wide of the last queen of Caria, Rennala of the Full Moon. A phantom of Rennala appears, and her countenance, her posture, her entire being radiates a quiet confidence that we haven't seen before. Her eyes a gentle blue, the Carian sorcery within her preparing to be unleashed, as we're seemingly transported to an ocean beneath a deep full moon. It's like the Moonlit Lake in Bloodborne, except it's 10 times better, and we're being threatened by a boss that looks scarily like Bayonetta, which I think is just fabulous. One very tiny detail I love is that in the initial appearance of Phantom Rennala, you can see your player character take a genuine step back. Whether it's from wariness or fear or admiration is up to you, but it's the only time where a boss clearly intimidates the player character in a cutscene, and I love that. At number 5, we have Malenia, Goddess of Rot, found in Elden Ring. Maybe this is because I just love a bit of camp, a bit of flair, and strong women, but Malenia's transition cutscene is just one of my favorites, because it's such a stark contrast from the calculated demeanor she exudes when we first meet her. Pre-battle, she is a badass, she's threatening, and she introduces herself with every death you take, pounding into you to heed her words. She is Malenia, Blade of Miquella, and she has never known defeat. So when we finally manage to overcome her phase 1 and we see her fall to the ground, we know it's not over. Our Tarnished takes a moment to look up at the tree where Miquella's visage lies, only to hear, wait. And Melania does not do things with subtlety, which is why a giant scarlet Aeonia begins to bloom where she fell, and in a reveal that would make such a velour blush, she emerges in her goddess of rot form. Butterflies burst forth from rotting wings, her armor discarded as the rot covers her body like a modesty towel. She rises into the air, sword in hand, outstretching her wings as she gazes down upon us with her full fury on display. Unlike a lot of the previous cutscenes, I love that Melania actually has her Phase 2 music start when the Scarlet Aeonia blooms. She's important enough that you get to hear that intimidating theme as she reveals her true form and her intent to kill you. It's also fun when you realize that Melania claims to have never known defeat, yet that's because she nuked Caelid during her battle with Radahn. Of course, we now know that was on purpose to bring Radahn's soul to Miquella, but I think it's entertaining to realize that Melania has known defeat. She just presses the Scarlet Aeonia button when it happens, and acts like it was all skill and not the blessing of a rot god. With a look I wish could be potentially referenced on Drag Race. Season 18 girls, get on it. I just adore Melania's phase transition. It hits all the right notes for me and sets up her upcoming fight perfectly. At number 4, we have Slave Knight Gale from Dark Souls 3, The Ringed City. The final boss of the Souls series, Gale was created to end a legacy, and you could tell that everything was put into this fight. You have the biggest arena in series history with one of the most striking designs we've ever seen. You have a boss fight against a character you've come to know, even if for a little while, giving you an actual connection. The Dark Soul itself is name-dropped multiple times in both the intro and transition cutscene, and the level of visual flair is beyond anything we'd seen up to this point in Soulsborne. Slave Knight Gale's first phase ends relatively quickly, with you only needing to damage a third of his health bar. From there, he falls to his knees as the music continues to play in the background. The grunts from his voice fade, though, as the blood begins pouring from his mouth onto his blade. The blood of the Dark Soul. And it sparks something within Gale. He's creating the paint he sought after, the blood of the Dark Soul within himself, and only a true battle will finish what he started. His sword darkens, his confidence restored, he slams it down into the ground, using his blade to lift himself up as a ghostly red smoke encompasses him. His red cape begins to bulge with the skulls of the dead, and his size swells with power. While the Gale from the opening cutscene felt like a beast who was desperate for blood, the Gale that rises from this mid-fight cutscene is a determined fighter, one who knows what they must do, and one who is empowered by the Dark Soul itself. As it seamlessly cuts back to gameplay, Gale strides towards you at his own pace, lightning striking the land around us as the true fight begins. He's not the first boss to do the beast to man transition, in fact he won't be the last on this video, but I am a sucker for that trope. I feel like it would just be criminal not to include the last cutscene ever developed for a Souls game, as they truly intended for it to be this intimidating and exciting moment for every player. I'm actually a short skip away from facing Gale in my Soul Level 1 run, and this cutscene has reminded me of just how terrifying he can be. At number 3, we have the Nameless King from Dark Souls 3. Perhaps not a popular choice. I think there is some bias at play here because I truly just adore the Nameless King fight with all my heart and soul. And beyond the fact that the music is composed by Motoi Sakuraba, one of my favorite composers, the arena is epic with this battle in the stormy clouds above an ancient temple, and you fight a fucking dragon in Phase 1. So when you're able to slay the King of the Storm, you're preparing for the Nameless King. But I was surprised to see a lot of depth in this transition cutscene. It's very reminiscent to me of the Ornstein and Smo cutscenes, where there's a little hidden emotion in the characters. It starts with the Nameless King standing beside his companion, the dragon on its last legs, unable to fly or escape the Unkindled One. He places a single hand upon the dragon's horn, a gesture of comfort for his friend in his final moments, because the Nameless King knows what must be done. And as he raises his sword to claim the soul of the King of the Storm, you actually see Nameless's blade shaking. He's trembling, he's upset, and yet he plunges his blade down, and in a gust of wind, he turns to the player, crackling with lightning, a cold fury in his countenance. I just love that touch of human emotion, that the Nameless King truly cared for his companion. There's a kinship there that on surface value is already pretty strong, but if you subscribe to a certain theory, this cutscene has even more weight. The theory that Ornstein is actually the King of the Storm. Ornstein left Anor Londo in search of Gwyn's firstborn, the one we fought in the first game being one of Gwendolyn's illusions. And after finishing this fight, we find Ornstein's discarded armor just left out in the open, no corpse next to it. The implication being he removed his armor willingly. Because Ornstein had a loyalty to Gwyn's firstborn, who we now know is the Nameless King, and Archdragon Peak was all about trying to become a dragon. How fitting would it be that the one person to succeed was known as a Dragon Slayer, yet finally sided with Gwyn's firstborn, who was banished for sympathizing with the dragons. That reverence that the Nameless King shows the King of the Storm is the same reverence that Ornstein shows Smo in their entry earlier in the video, and even if it's unintentional or the theory is flat out wrong, I subscribe to it, like you should subscribe to the channel. At number 2, we have Ludwig the Holy Blade, found in Bloodborne. We all knew he was top 3 minimum, I can't deny that. I quote this man far more than I care to admit. The only mid-fight cutscene in Bloodborne, if you're not including the introduction of the moon presence, Ludwig just eats the scene, doing what Gale did, but so much better. His pre-fight cutscene is that of a beast. A corpse is warning us that here he comes, Ludwig the Accursed, this horrific horse-like monstrosity lined with eyes and legs and mouths and body parts, and the first half of the fight reflects this energy. The music is chaotic, the moveset is aggressive, and there's no sense of strategy. It's a creature leaping at you, jumping onto the ceiling, vomiting at you, trying to crush you beneath its hooves. And yet at half health, a cutscene plays, Ludwig screeching as he falls into the pool of blood before a glimmering light overtakes his face. He turns his head, and for the first time we hear Ludwig speak. "You were at my side all along." And then the reveal that FromSoft diehard fans were waiting for, their jaws dropping as the iconic Moonlight Greatsword that appears in every FromSoft game is the central focus of this boss fight. Ludwig's humanity is restored by the glow of the moonlight and the gleam in his eyes. He takes a hold of his sword, and the music swells as the cutscene continues until he holds the blade aloft and brings it to bear. The seamless cut from him holding the sword in front to the gameplay where he's in the exact same position is mwah, chef's kiss, and the music is perfectly synced so that at the end of the cutscene it hits a peak, and some of Bloodborne's most iconic orchestral notes begin to play. Taking a creature that goes from beast to human is one thing, incorporating one of the most well-known weapons in the Soulsborne franchise is another thing, but having it so that Ludwig is weak to serrated weapons in Phase 1 due to his beast-like nature, while removing said weakness in Phase 2 due to his regained humanity, is utterly insane. A fantastic cutscene, gorgeous cinematography, the focus is always on the sword, which it needs to be. They knew what they were doing. And it would have been my number 1, but there's another more recent sword that, at least for me, ended up being more iconic. At number 1, we have Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame, from Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, we can debate if this truly is a phase transition cutscene, because technically Mini Midra doesn't have a boss health bar, but anytime you die, the fog wall appears outside the boss room, and you always have to fight Mini Midra before you get back to Maxi Midra, so I think this counts, it's my list. Midra is my new favorite cutscene in Elden Ring. A man who tried and failed to become the Lord of the Frenzied Flame. His manse was swatted by the Hornsent who followed his IP address because he didn't subscribe to NordVPN and raided him live on Twitch, impaling him with the Great Sword of Damnation. After this, I think Midra realized his mistake and dedicated the rest of his life to keeping the flame within him. But Nanaya, his lady, who many suspect was a maiden of the Frenzied Flame, told him to endure. And endure he does, all the way until our Tarnished finds him. You can read her words as telling him to contain the flame, but you can also read her words as forcing him to the brink of despair, so that when the Lord of Frenzied Flame does arrive, he'll have the power to do what needs to be done. So Midra finally gives up. He takes a hold of the sword, keeping him together, and pulls. It is the most disgusting imagery in any FromSoft game for me. It's horrific the way his skin pulls off and the sounds that he makes. I'm really grateful we got the fade to black. For some reason though, I didn't know what to expect on my first playthrough, so seeing Midra's suddenly larger body stand before erupting into the Lord of Frenzied Flame after that turn was jaw-dropping. After all, we only knew the Lord of Frenzied Flame through the base game ending where we became him ourselves. So suddenly being told, hey, you're fighting him, and then having him be one of the best fights in the entire game, it's perfection. The slow turn, the reveal of the flames, the way they grow brighter, the music coming in right as the flame appears, the sword coiling and twisting into position, and his little baby knife in the other hand, it is on par with Ludwig. And I think as more time passes, Midra will continue to grow in popularity, as will his cutscene. In the end, Midra did become the Lord of Frenzied Flame like he originally wanted. He just got very unlucky that he was going up against our Tarnished of all people. And that's my list. Which phase transition cutscenes are your favorite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. I want to give a quick shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. It's $4.99. It gets you early access to future videos, and it gets you a special Dark Souls 3 Soul Level 1 run playthrough, which is very fun. If you want to follow me, consider checking out my Blue Sky. It's the perfect place to go, and I'll see you next time for another video. Adios.